I think freedom will return to the United States of America when we get rid of these controllers, but don't look at your government to come help you or save you or teach you how to do it, because it won't be the government that we think of.
Hey guys, Josh Lake here today with Bix Weir, and we're going to be talking about the financial markets and kind of a little bit of the history of how we got to this financial fiasco that we're currently sitting in today. But before we jump into all that, Bix, always so good to see you. Thanks for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited about this topic. I haven't, I've forgotten so much as you get older and you've studied this stuff a long time ago. But the main thing is, hey, something's going on. You need to be aware of it. It's been going on forever. It might feel like, oh my God, this is so crazy right now. It's been crazy for over 100 years. So just keep that in mind. Your ancestors have been through this, but nobody's ever been able to fix the problem. So hopefully we can.
Hopefully. I mean, that's a lot of the reason why I wanted to bring you on, is because you are with the RoadtoRoota, with everything that you've studied. You've done a lot of the research, or at least you've become aware a lot of the reasons why the financial system is so corrupt and so broken today. And so I just kind of wanted to go through a little bit of history so that the people tuning in, if they didn't know already, they might learn a thing or two about just how we got here as the dollar, the fiat dollar, the Federal Reserve note has, kind of collapsed or is collapsing as we speak. And so just a little context around that. So, I was doing some research before we started this today, because I personally, I've been in the space for a little bit of time, but I don't have a full history. And I don't think it's something that is taught too frequently. I mean, it might be taught in some schools, but I didn't really get a solid education on any of this,
Education in this realm doesn't happen in schools or colleges. It happens. It used to be your own research. Now there's so many YouTube videos about how we got here. It's great. YouTube has been, although the censorship is terrible and they steer people in certain directions, it's been a great resource for waking people up to what's really gone on over the past 100 years.
Absolutely. And I think even beyond 100 years, man, like I was watching some early, like you said, some YouTube videos just to get a little bit of context around this whole thing. And, I learned that we really never had our shit together, really, when it comes to a national currency. Even when we became America, we were trying to figure out what to use as currency, between like constitutional money, or not even constitutional money, colonial money, and then the revolutionary, what was it called? I have it written down. The greenbacks, it was just like we were kind of trying all these different things. And it sounds like we've had dozens and dozens of iterations of currency kind of flow through America, and none of them really stuck until we hit the Federal Reserve note. And there was still even history before that, with just having the constitutional money of silver and then moving away from that. And I really want to get into how we kind of decoupled from the precious metal backed system that we had. And so I know that's something that you have a lot of experience talking about. And so, I was thinking we could kind of start there with the creation of the Federal Reserve. Most people don't even know what the Federal Reserve is. So could you, kind of just give a little RoadtoRoota summary as to what is, the Federal Reserve that currently operates our financial system?
Well, sure. Back at the creation of the United States, we didn't have a Federal Reserve. There were Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States of America. This is the third attempt at a central bank in the United States. The first two lasted 10 years. They had 10-year charters, and they both ended the 10-year charter in misery, meaning, they always, unless there's some kind of control, non-human control over money, people are going to print money if they can print it. But there's all kinds of problems with it. The central banks were really set up to provide a backstop to the commercial banks. The commercial banks were actually creating money back in the day. They had little IOUs. It's not like the money we had today. They were supposed to be based off a gold or silver in their vaults of a commercial bank. But they'd have problems and bank runs, and the whole concept of fractional reserve banking is they create 3 times or 10 times as much money as they have in reserves. And that really didn't kick in to high gear until the creation of the Federal Reserve System, which is in 1913. So it's about 1907, we were having a huge financial problem. A lot of banks were failing. People were losing their life savings. There was no FDIC insurance or anything like that. So the banks kept pushing to have a Federal Reserve System that managed the money of the United States for the United States people. Now, it is unconstitutional for anyone other than Congress to create money.
Through the Treasury, right?
Yeah, the Treasury is in charge of creating the money of the United States of America. But they did pass the Federal Reserve Act. Now, some say it wasn't ratified and things like that. It's clearly unconstitutional because it is the Federal Reserve that's really taken over the money control of the United States of America. And the Federal Reserve is not part of the U.S. government. It is a standalone entity of banks. It's controlled by the banking system and not the Treasury. Now, the U.S. government does have the ability to revoke the charter at any second. So if there's a bill in Congress today to revoke the charter of the United States the Federal Reserve System, they could close down the Federal Reserve today and legally take all the assets of the Federal Reserve. Although the assets of the Federal Reserve is just debt. The Federal Reserve doesn't really, they bought a bunch of assets with money they created out of thin air. So I guess you would call that assets, but they're basically buying the junk. Mortgage-backed securities that really have no backing had to be sold out of the banks because the banks held them, they'd be bankrupt by now. So it's kind of the situation we're in today, is that this system has been going on for so long. And it's the reason that the dollar, it costs $5 to buy a cup of coffee now. If you go into Starbucks, back when the Federal Reserve was created, it was maybe a penny or two. And the whole concept of creating money out of thin air has diluted our money significantly. The amount of money that's created today is just shocking. If you were to tell anybody in the early 1900s that the U.S. government would be $32 trillion in debt, they'd say, no way. What are you talking about? That's impossible. And there was no debt back in that day. There was a little because we started taking on debt in the United States because we wanted credit throughout Europe and different countries as far as being financially stable. It's kind of like a credit card, your credit score today. You get dinged if you don't have credit, which is kind of odd to think about. You don't want credit because that's puts you in debt to somebody else. But at the same time, if they think you're not participating, then they're going to not give you a better credit rating. They'll get to think, well, this guy's either dealing with things under the table or he's just not participating. We're not making any money off him, basically. In 1913, the Fed was created. They were given the ability to create Federal Reserve notes. At the time, they were supposed to be backed by gold out of the U.S. Treasury. And we believe they were to an extent. And then in 1933, that came into question. And then Roosevelt confiscated all the gold in the United States. And everybody's like, oh my God, they confiscated gold. How un-American, which to a point it was, but the vast majority of people didn't have any gold in the U.S. It was the banks and the Federal Reserve System that really had all the gold. And that's what was confiscated in 1933, 1934. In 1934, they created the Gold Act of 1934, which gave the U.S. Treasury the power to rig any market they want. And so they basically confiscated the gold and started rigging the market. Then they changed the price of gold. It was fixed to the dollar at $20 and something cents. They changed it to $35 after they confiscated everybody's gold. So they devalued it. Everybody said, oh my God, I gave you $1,000 worth of gold. I have they swapped it with Federal Reserve notes. And then they changed the value of gold. It was everybody's like, what in the hell is going on? But to save America from the banks, that's what Roosevelt did. And I think it was something he had to do, but we stayed on that system, a gold circulating system until 1971. And in 1971, even the pseudo gold standard we had, a non-redeemable gold standard, was called into question because countries could redeem gold with the United States. And that's what France was doing because they saw the U.S. printing so much money to take care of all kinds of things in the 60s, like the Vietnam War and things like that. And France started pulling all their gold out. Nixon said, we're going to run out of gold, so we're going to shut the gold window, meaning no one could ever redeem U.S. gold-backed bonds for gold. And basically defaulting. And since then, we've seen hyperinflation kick off like you wouldn't believe. They won't tell you that there's hyperinflation, but you can just see it by the price of coffee going from 2 cents to $5. That's caused because they're printing way too much money. And now it's completely unhinged from any reality. There's no talk of paying off the debt. There's no talk of balancing the budget. The only talk is how many trillions are going to be spent and where they're going to give them. So it's completely out of control, as was predicted in the RoadtoRoota documents. And that's where we are right now. And we're at the end game of fiat money. So that's in a nutshell kind of where we are. There's a lot of things that happen in the middle of all that. So let's go down your list of questions.
Yeah, man. I mean, you brought up a lot of really good stuff on that. I mean, we could talk about everything you just brought up. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is, we were talking about in the 30s, how the gold was confiscated. First, before we even get there, the reason why gold was used for the backing of the currency, I mean, that's just because of history, right? That's just because gold has always been used as a financial metal, or what is the reason for that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that it did have a history as a financial metal, but only for the elite, the banks and the big wealthy people use gold. The people use silver as money for the most part because it was more abundant. And this is before they used it for electronics and was consuming silver. Silver was money back before the early 1900s. But then in the U.S., so silver was defined. The definition of a dollar is based on silver, not gold. And then the gold-silver ratio was set based on how much of each was circulating. So it was set at, I think, 13-1 at the beginning, but it ended up 20-1 come the late 1880s. Mm-hmm. And in 1889, it was a really funky thing happened. They called the Silver Massacre or something to that effect. The crime of 1879. That 1879. What happened was they changed the U.S. Mint operating procedures legally through Congress, and they said they're doing it for copper and other metals, just to get them in the mix of what was going on. But in actuality, it was actually that bankers were trying to get silver out of circulation because they didn't have the silver. The people had the silver, and the banks had the gold. So in 1879, they passed this law that took silver out of free mintage. So before that, you can take your silver that you found in the ground or dug up or however you had it, take it to the mint, and they'll make you a silver dollar. After that, the mint no longer did that, which meant the U.S. was pretty much off a silver standard, and we could use your silver, but you couldn't have free mintage, which is huge, but you could still use gold, and the bankers had all the gold. So in 1900 is when they voted just to go onto a gold only standard. We were still using silver as money, as money in the for the people, but the banks weren't holding as much of that. So they said, we're going to go onto a gold standard and just base the price of our money off of gold as it's traded around the world, which is great for the bankers because they had all the gold. So a lot of the silver miners were pissed off, and they did all these concessions that, oh, no, don't worry, we'll give you money this way. But that faded quickly. And then you had the financial crisis of 1907, which everybody that I have talked to that did some research into it It was a whole bunch of banks failed during that time. It was the bankers doing it to frighten everybody to get the Federal Reserve implemented. The Federal Reserve was created through the Jekyll Island meetings by the big banks in 1910. I believe, in the RoadtoRoota documents and all the evidence I found, is that they did it because of all the gold that was found in the Grand Canyon and all the way up the Colorado River. They were talking billions of ounces of gold. Now, in those early days, there wasn't hardly any gold circulating. In the U.S., I think we had 100 million ounces, million with an M. Around the world, there's about 300 million ounces of gold. And then here we are in the United States of America claiming that we have found billions and billions and billions of ounces of gold. I believe that was the instigation for the meeting at Jekyll Island by the banksters, and then ultimately the reason that Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 was because of that problem. All that gold would have destroyed governments, destroyed people, thrown people out of whack. All the rich people wouldn't be as rich because their money would be diluted by 10x or 20x. So yeah, it was a big deal. And the thing that I don't like about it, it was done all in secret. If you were upfront with it, why you're allowing the Federal Reserve to be created, that's one thing. But if you're gonna do it under, I think it was December 23rd that they did it at night, where a big chunk of Congress had already gone home for Christmas, given that it takes a while to travel back in the day. You can't hop on a flight in 1913 to get home. Your horse and buggy had to take you, or you took the train mostly. There were some cars, obviously, but not. I mean, it wasn't. We didn't have the transportation, so people would take 2-3 days just to get home. So Congress was gutted, and they passed it. And Woodrow Wilson, being really anti-banker, everybody's like, well, why did Woodrow Wilson pass the Federal Reserve Act? I think it was because of what happened in the Grand Canyon, the gold they found, and then instantly all the bankers pulled all the funding for all the mining operations in the Grand Canyon up and down the Colorado River. And ultimately, Woodrow Wilson passed the Grand Canyon, made it a national park, and said no more mining anywhere, or excavation, or exploring for anything within the boundaries of the Grand Canyon. It's about 300 miles long, all the way up the Colorado River, past Lee's Ferry, and all the way up. And then there's more all the way up into above like Nevada and Utah, and all the way up there. All these new regulations came out in national parks. So there's so much gold in there that we're not allowed to touch. And the Navajo Nation was created on the other side of the bank of the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. So yeah, nobody knows what's been in there. That's been 100 years since it's been explored, other than the covert stuff that's done. But back in the day, I have dozens of articles of companies that are mining gold out of the banks of the Colorado River, and they're finding it everywhere. So really interesting stuff.
So when they shut down the Grand Canyon as a national park and created the Navajo Nation, and since then, sounds like created a bunch of other national parks. Those were never, the creation of those parks was never because of gold, right? It's never told publicly that those were created because there's gold in the ground that we're trying to save. It's just because they're trying to maintain the land or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a reason to turn the Grand Canyon into a national park. It's the most beautiful spot on the planet.
Right.
So there's plenty of reason to do that. So they didn't have any problem pushing that through. And there are other, like many other places in the Southwest, very gold rich areas that have been put into national parks. Dianne Feinstein was famous for locking up millions of acres of gold bearing land in the Desert Wildlife Reserve of Southern California. It's kind of insane when you think about it, but when you know what's in the ground, it makes sense. While we have unbacked fiat printing and people accept that, you might as well use that before you have to use the gold in the ground. So a lot has been locked up in like the Anwar, the Alaskan National Wildlife Reserve. That's all huge gold area and oil area. There's military bases built right around gold mines, so you can't go in there because it's a military base. all kinds of things have been done in the last 100 years to hide the riches in the ground in the United States and around the world. Though we're not the only country. There are many countries around the world that'll find a gold mine. All of a sudden, the government comes in, shuts it down, and no one's allowed to go there.
So with the question I have based on all that is that it sounds like we're saving this gold. It sounds like we're saving this to be used later, right?
Well, absolutely. Everybody knows, even bankers know. And I heard an FDIC meeting where they're talking about the fact that the system is wobbling. Everybody knows unbacked fiat money does not last and has not lasted in history. There have been many attempts to create money out of thin air, going back to the Mississippi land grants and all that stuff in France. And, every single time it only lasts usually 10 years. And then poof, they create too many of the unbacked things because, human nature is to print as much money as you can. If you had a printing press, how much would you print? You print as much as you need or want. So when people are in charge, that's a huge problem. That's why bankers hate the gold standard, because it confines them to a limited amount of money available. Even though they had it all, they didn't like it. They really like controlling money, paper money, because and derivatives. When they added derivatives in the 70s, it was, wow, we can do anything we want and control any market we want. So yeah,
and that was because, so you're talking about the fractional reserve system right now, or is that different than what?
Well, the derivative market is different than the fractional reserve system. The fractional reserve system in banking is, if you get $1 million deposited into your bank, you can lend out $9 million more. That's how money is created in the United States. It's not created at Federal Reserve. They create a little, but that's how most money, because they lend it into existence.
That's the debt you're talking about.
Well, no, it's not. It's debt to us. To them, it's an asset. So right. When you buy a house, say you buy $1 million house, the bank only has 100,000, but they lend you $1 million and you make payments on that. That's newly created money.
Right.
That's a powerful thing. That's called fractional reserve lending.
Yeah.
And the idea is that everybody's not going to come in for their money at the same time. So you can expand the money base, allow people to build houses. Like most people would not live in our housing today had it not been for the loans they got from a bank.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a banking benefit. It's a benefit to the people who want to buy houses with debt, and a benefit to those people who own houses already, because the debt is available, and especially when it's cheap, the housing prices go up. It's not like the house is worth more unless you put a lot of money and improvements into it. The house is a depreciating asset. What is changing is the ability to pay more money for it and the value of that money being paid.
Yes. Okay, so we said a lot there. I want to bring it back to where the gold standard, or the gold being saved in the ground, is pointing toward what it sounds like. And I think, just having known you and knowing the RoadtoRoota theory, is that we're trying to get back to that eventually, right? And that, this fiat system that we have, where we are able to use, fractional reserve lending to create as much money as we want, or, to a degree, that's going to end. Or it's planned to end, right? Because that's, why else would we be saving all this gold?
Yeah. Well, it will end. It's not necessarily planned to end. The plan was, because they were going to end it back in 1980. Ronald Reagan put together the Gold Commission, which was their job. All these banks and economists got together and said, hey, we got inflation at 20%. What do we do? Should we end the old system and start something new? Or should we try to salvage what we have and kick the can down the road? And that's when they decided to salvage what they have, kick the can down the road. Paul Volcker raised the interest rates to 20%. Everybody's like, what's going on? And then they started rigging the markets to get everything under control. And since then, they've been printing money like madmen, since 1971, really, when we went off the gold standard. But it really kicked in with Reagan's Star Wars programs and government spending. And the idea was, you want to use all this fiat money up and buy as much as you can, build out your roads, your bridges, your military, until no one accepts it anymore. And And with control of the media and control of prices of commodities and other assets, the United States has done an amazing job. First time ever that unbacked fiat money has lasted so long. It's been since 71. So that's over 50 years. It's usually dying in 10 years, which it almost did in 1980, 1981. But yeah, I do think that the United States has plenty of assets in the ground that we've been saving for that end date. The question is, when is the end date? In the 1920s, we actually shipped all our large mining equipment to Russia to get it out of the U.S. because we wanted to go just on paper money, and we wanted other countries to supply us with the commodities we need. That's why we struck up the petrodollar agreement with Saudi Arabia, where what was Kissinger and Greenspan went over to Saudi Arabia and set up a system where they agreed to only sell oil in U.S. dollars from anybody in the world, and we would protect them militarily. And then they also had to reinvest their dollars into the U.S. stock market, which helped the stock market. So it created an artificial demand for the U.S. dollar all around the world, which gave us the ability to print more and more, because every country in the world had to have U.S. dollars if they wanted to buy oil from the oil-rich countries of the Middle East. And if people tried to skirt that deal or go away from it, like Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi in Libya, the U.S. military would go in and take them out. That's the history of the United States, unfortunately, and it all stems from this controlling this unbacked fiat system. More people have died since the creation of the Federal Reserve System than at any time in history. You have World War I, World War II, all these crazy wars. Usually wars don't last that long because they're expensive. But when you have a printing press to print as much money as you want, you can go to war anytime you want, and cost doesn't matter. So I think when we finally do get rid of this old system, you won't see wars going crazy. They're trying to expand the Russian-Ukraine war. And they could have settled early on in that, but the U.S. said, don't do it, Zelensky. And, he's bought and paid for by the right people. So there you have that one.
Okay, so that was a lot of really good stuff. And something that you just mentioned that I think is an interesting thing to talk about is how there's a need for war, or at least monetarily, it sounds like the reason why we are in so much war all the time is one of the reasons is to control, kind of like police the world. This petrodollar is a great topic that I like talking about, because it was really what made the dollar the global reserve currency of the world, is because everyone needed to use it. And now every country, like you said, that needed to buy oil needed to hold dollars. And so that's one reason I think why the dollar is still being held so highly today, is because it's still so needed. But we're starting to see that kind of drift away now, right? We're starting to see a little bit of countries starting to pull away from that system.
We are, although when derivatives really kicked in the 90s, we really went away for the need for a petrodollar, because we can control the value of oil and the dollar with derivatives now. So that's why the derivative market has gone from a tiny market in the early 70s to $2.5-3 quadrillion now, is because it's used to price everything, even the value of the U.S. dollar versus all other currencies, because currencies are floating, meaning there's nothing backing them, so they only trade against each other. So as we print a lot of U.S. dollars, so does Japan, so does China, so does the EU. Everybody, we're in a global print off right now. And the U.S., because we control all these markets with computers and derivatives, we can decide which countries thrive and which countries get destroyed, no matter how much money they print. It's a click of a mouse to buy and sell $1 trillion worth of U.S. dollar assets. And Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan said $5 trillion a day goes in and out of his Miami money center. $5 trillion a day for what? I mean, that's massive amounts of money for a bank that only has $3 trillion in assets total.
So are these derivatives that are being traded back and forth, they're being traded by the central bank or these private banks, or is it all just like a bunch
All
of
of
them together?
Yeah, all
Okay.
of the above. All of the coordination is done out of the Exchange Stabilization Fund in the United States. So out of the New York Fed and the U.S. Treasury. U.S. Treasury has a trading floor in the basement of the Treasury building that they showed one time. It was amazing. I was like watching like CNBC, and we're in the basement of the U.S. Treasury where they monitor markets and trade different types of commodities. I'm like, what? This is on TV. They're walking down these stairs into the basement of the U.S. Treasury, showing the computer operations for the Treasury, but they coordinate mainly through the New York Fed. New York Fed runs a lot of the exchange stabilization funds and things like that. So yeah, and derivatives are, I mean, that's what's traded on the COMEX, the commodity markets. That's what's traded in the FX markets, the foreign exchange markets. Now that everything's been computerized, and a lot of this is just banks trading back and forth to each other. Right. So England and the US, the two central bankers will get together and say, okay, we're going to bring the pound up, and the US dollar, we're going to bring it down a little. And then on next April 16th, we're going to do the opposite and flip it back. Ultimately, we'll end up in the same place, but we'll get rid of some speculators, and violent moves happen all the time in commodities as we've seen with silver. And I mean, you just look at the silver market. One exchange, the only exchange on the planet, is the COMEX, which is a futures and options exchange, derivatives. And they trade over 500,000 ounces of electronic derivative silver every day just to control a commodity that literally, it does just 800 million in mine supply every year with thousands of people working on that. But if you're the Treasury, you can click a mouse, or their bullion banks, what they call them, Bank of America, JP Morgan's the biggest, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, some of the big guys, and they all collude together. We've seen that with the JP Morgan lawsuit out of the DOJ, bank A, B, C, and D, and they're sending messages together and saying, okay, we're going to slam at 2:30, we're going to slam the silver market from this price down to this price. So make sure you dump everything, and then we can load up when people start getting scared. So yeah, all the documentation and emails are there for anybody to see.
So this collusion, because this is an interesting thing to me, this collusion between all the big guys, the banksters, as you call them, that's been going on this whole time, right? Ever since the beginning of banking.
A beginning of time. I mean, banker market rigging will always be there. Market rigging from day one has been there. And the only problem now is we have these regulators who don't do their job and actually run cover. They're running cover right now for the silver manipulation. All the data is for the commitment of traders report is down right now. So we don't know who's trading what. And the CFTC says, oh, we have a computer glitch. Yeah.
And so these people who are running this, it's been kind of passed down through generation, or I think, are the Rothschilds a part of this whole thing? Or is that
the original? Yeah. I mean, the Rothschild banking family is probably the most powerful banking family that we know. And then there's the Rockefellers and the Warburgs, and you go all the way down the list, the Morgans. There are definitely some heavy hitters when it comes to financial manipulation. Who really controls the financial system? The Queen of England used to be a very big player. The Pope was in charge of a lot as well. So yeah, today they have it, but I don't think they have control of the manipulation parts of it. They don't need it. They've got all the wealth that they have extracted from humanity. And they'll never need more. It's more like the JP Morgans of the world and Citibanks of the world now, who the Fed and BlackRock, a non-bank, is a huge participant in market manipulation. They're actually the ones that own SLV, the silver ETF. And they have a lot of big time silver hitters who work for BlackRock behind the scenes, but you don't hear about them in silver because you don't see them taking deliveries. You don't hear much about them because they do it stealthily and don't have to report because they're not a bank.
So these players that you're talking about, they've gobbled up all the wealth over time, and they control, sounds like, all the markets and all the prices of the commodities. because of this system, this Federal Reserve fiat system. And do you think that, as this system begins or is going to shift, they're going to maintain that control over everyone? Is that the plan, do you think?
I'm sure they'd want to. I don't think they will. Remember, when this falls apart, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing and a lot of people looking at who's to blame.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to gold and silver manipulation, like the Rothschilds were part of the London gold pool that used to decide the price all the way up till about 15 years ago or something. They were.
We've seemed to have lost Bix. Oh,
there we go.
All right. Sorry, looks like we lost you there for a sec. It
Yeah.
always happens whenever we start getting into the juicy stuff.
I know. What were we talking about?
We were talking about if the people in control, if the system changes, will they maintain control? And you said you were starting to say that they would probably want to, ideally.
Yeah.
And so,
all right, I'll just go from there.
Okay.
Ideally, they would want to maintain control. But when a lot of the big guys, the really big guys, the worst thing that can happen to them is exposure. So they're gonna hide away in their little cubby holes, like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the really big money that isn't visible right now, and let the visible entities like JP Morgan and Citibank and BlackRock take the heat for the system falling, because we're going to need someone to blame, and they're not going to blame we the people. They're going to blame politicians and bankers. So yeah, I think it's coming down to that day where the blame comes out and the really big money is running away, and the little money is going to be, the little power hungry people like JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon there are going to be the first people that they blame. Also politicians, though. I mean, these politicians are about as dirty as they get. So we'll see how it all goes down.
It'll be interesting. I'm excited. I'm sitting here with my popcorn waiting for all of it to explode. And, that's why I think, just from the education that the RoadtoRoota and so many people in the alternative space has suggested, is to not be a part of the system. Try your best to get your wealth, get your money out of this system, because it is surely going to go through a very rocky or volatile time as things kind of level out. And so for the average person, what would you suggest paying attention to? What would you suggest doing? Not financial advice, just talking about it. What do you think is something worth doing with all of this information?
I think getting yourself positioned for chaos, financial chaos, which means getting assets in your own possession. Gold, silver's my favorite, but if you like gold, silver's currently at 85 to 1, 85 ounces of silver by 1 ounce of gold. I think that is going to be closer to 1 to 1 when all this is over. So I think if you have any gold, a great idea would be to swap it for 85 ounces of silver. Also, cryptocurrencies, I think, are going to be very valuable in the future. Not all of them. Depending on how much the regulators want to continue to abuse the cryptocurrency markets, which they are. They're the cause of every slam. And it is the same people, the Exchange Stabilization Fund and the Treasury and the regulators all collude together to do the takedowns of silver, of cryptos. But the future is cryptos. And I know a lot of my diehard gold bugs have a hard time understanding that. But it doesn't matter that they do understand it or not. They'll do fine with the gold and silver. They'll do okay. But they'll find out in the future. And we are already in the future. I mean, cryptos are, Bitcoin's 14 years old. And anybody who's held Bitcoin for all that time is doing extremely well. And I think 14 years from now, we're going to see the same kind of price appreciation. We're going to talk about, Bitcoin in the millions of dollars, not, is it going to stay above $21,000? So yeah, I think but they all have to be in your own possession, because when the banks go down, you're not going to be able to know the price of gold, silver, or cryptos. All those exchanges will be gone. Anybody holding their gold, silver, or cryptos in a third party, most likely it'll be gone. I do think there'll be a lot of nationalization of metals. I think especially in warehouses, large warehouses, because the people are going to be pissed. And we got to use something as money. especially if you have ownership in gold mines, silver mines in different countries. Every country is going to stop trading with each other, is in the RoadtoRoota documents. So that means anybody who owns a silver mines in Mexico will never see a penny out of them.
So it's interesting you say that, because I agree with you that I believe cryptos are the future. I believe the future is here. I believe that cryptos are 100% the best way to transact peer-to-peer going forward. But something else that I know that you study and that you're a big proponent of is that there's other plans. You know, there's other plans for maybe returning back to a metal-based system. And, you know, from the research that I know you've been keeping up on, it seems like there's plans that we can physically see with the, you know, the US Mint and the production of, you know, things like this.
There you go. It's upside down.
Oh, yeah. This guy right there. So do you think that, well, this is the old one too, because now they're different.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Can you talk about that a little bit? Can you just talk about what you see going on at the Mint and maybe how that's going to play into the future?
Sure. Like you said, there's a lot of people with a lot of plans. I don't think gold and silver is a plan. I think gold and silver is already the money of the United States of America. It's our constitutional money. You don't need a decider. You don't need a decider to say, we're going back to the gold standard. We never left it. We just didn't use it. We don't have to pass any new laws to use U.S. mint money as money. Whereas the NESRA or GESRA or any kind of CBDC, central bank digital currency, or anything like that takes deciders, takes people of trustworthy people in power to implement something like that. And we don't have that anymore. So that's the beauty of gold and silver. We don't need a plan. It's already in our Constitution that is the money of the United States. And I think that will come into play in a gigantic way, especially with the Mint making so many silver eagles, but not selling them to the public right now, that I've been documenting at the RoadtoRoota. I think, cryptos will be great in the future, but they're not going to be run out of the U.S. government. You know, when I think freedom will return to the United States of America when we get rid of these controllers. And you can use Bitcoin or Litecoin or anything you want. It's up to you, but don't look at your government to come help you or save you or teach you how to do it, because it won't be the government that we think of. Government will scale down to the tiny federal government that we originally should have. How many people? I don't know, but it's not, I think, 35 million people in the United States currently work directly for or indirectly for the government. It's crazy. That's 10% of the population working for an entity that does nothing but get in the way and help perpetuate the con. So yeah, I think gold and silver will be the money of the United States government and the United States people. And then whatever you want to use, if you want to use fiat money, because they're printing a whole bunch of them, go for it. But when you have better money, people will use those fiat money to buy the gold and silver.
So that's something that I have been kind of playing around with in my mind too, is that it sounds like we're moving into a time where there's going to be multiple avenues of currency all at play. I definitely agree that there's going to be some sort of form of gold and silver, just based on the research that you've done, just based on the amount that the Mint is creating, but hoarding away, it sounds like. That's probably one of the plays for the government to be able to use metals as, tender or as currency. Tender being what you can pay taxes in, right? Is that right? What tender means? And then currency as in what we can exchange with. And then I also see, the crypto side of things, where that is totally separate from the government in terms of true crypto, decentralized cryptocurrency. And then even within that, or next to that, I guess, is the central bank digital currencies that are being talked about and pushed out. We've seen it being pushed out in a couple different countries already around the world, where it's not really taken very well, it sounds like. And so I do see that there's just a juggle of the future of the financial system, or at least for the users, us, to have a couple of different options And I think it comes down to us picking which option is going to survive based on how we invest, based on how we spend. And so, with that, do you think that is that something you see in the future, or is that inaccurate in your eyes?
No, I see it as a lot less government involvement, which means the government doesn't get to pick the winners and losers. Gold and silver will be used as money because it's our constitutional money already, but its purchasing power will be determined on how much is available. And I don't know. I doubt the U.S. government will allow any gold to be exported out of the U.S. or imported, or silver. And that, as a matter of fact, that's in the RoadtoRoota documents, that the countries no longer trade. And they're saying maybe someday we'll get back to trading. But right now, basically, we'll put our arms around our country, bring all our soldiers home, and put them on the borders. But I don't think we'll have to worry about the borders, because Canada has a lot of gold and silver, and Mexico has massive amounts of silver. The big exodus of the United States of the illegal immigrants will happen instantly when silver goes to $2,000-$3,000 an ounce, because Mexico is the largest, has the largest deposits of silver anywhere else in the world, has been providing a third of all silver to everywhere in the world. Mexico should be the richest country in the world if silver was freely traded, but they've been abused by their politicians and military and the U.S. government. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't. When Trump said Mexico is going to pay for the wall, I guarantee you Mexico will pay for the wall if silver's $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 an ounce.
Right. Well, I agree with that, and I think there's just a lot of uncertainty coming down the road. And so, for us, for the people who are just at home trying to figure out what to do, I like your advice of just trying to maintain your wealth by controlling it yourself, by holding your assets in your own possession. Don't be giving all of this power that you have in the form of wealth to be held by third parties that really don't have your best interests in mind, and have, sounds like, other plans to, potentially change how things are run when it comes to the financial system. And so, that's what you've been preaching all along at the RoadtoRoota. And that's what we're trying to help promote here at the Pebbleton Post, is that we are the ones who can be in control of our wealth, and that just based on history, just based on what's going on right now, the powers that be might not have our best interests in mind when it comes to how the financial system is run and how we are cogs in that machine, essentially. And so the more we can wake up to that, the more that we can understand this information, the more that people can have conversations like the one that we're having right now. Hopefully more people will become awake to this world and to what they can do to empower themselves. And so, where can people find you with the RoadtoRoota? Are you still going to be doing this kind of work going forward?
I'll be doing it all the way till the crash, and then I think I'll be forced out. But it'll be I'm in semi-retirement mode. I don't plan on. I'll do one-off shows. I think we're working on something in Oklahoma City with Litecoin Lisa for her annual event. Maybe Florida, but we're not going to go touring, that, at least that I know of right now. And I think there's enough people out there who know the message, and it's just about calling out the current controllers of things, the regulators and the banks and your government official, and saying we've had enough, and the people are going to take back the monetary system of our country. We're going to take back our country. And I think that's wonderful. And you can do that. You can do your part by buying as much physical silver and getting it in your own possession as you possibly can.
I love it. And that's definitely, you've instilled that in me. I got a couple of these lying around because of you. And so glad to have you on. Glad that you are so knowledgeable and just been such a leader in the fight. And I, really, I'm thankful that you're here to help spread that message here on the Pebbleton Post, and to have been such an instrumental mentor and leader for me in this world. And so, if you enjoyed this conversation, if you enjoy Bix Weir and the conversations that he and I have, make sure to go check him out at the RoadtoRoota. And then also, like and subscribe and join the Pebbleton Post, because this is where Paige and I are going to be doing a lot of work, a lot of video content in the effort of creating more awareness, in the effort of inspiring people to take action in their own lives. And we're going to be posting here, which could be some of this on YouTube, definitely on Rumble, but Patreon especially, we're going to be pushing a lot of our content. And so if you want to check it out and see more of these conversations, please give us a follow. And until then, do you have anything you want to say for the people, Bix?
I'm excited for the Pebbleton post. When this gets rolled out, I want to be involved as much as I can. So let me know when I can pop my head in and share some of the wisdom.
Oh, well, it would be an honor to have you on regularly. And I definitely look forward to that, because we gotta fight. We're not quite at the end, and it's probably going to be something that's going to be a long time in the making. And I feel the obligation, and I know you do too, to really help bring that fight to the people so that we can understand what's happening and take control and do our part. And so thanks for coming on, Bix. Always appreciate you, man. And for those of you guys tuning in, we'll see you on the next one.